I want to give you now a live look at the White House this morning, 7:27 there. And as we've been reporting, President Trump will meet with the Israeli Prime Minister there later today. Benjamin Netanyahu says this meeting is a testimony to the strength of the Israeli-American alliance. The meeting is expected to focus on the Gaza ceasefire deal and the threat of Iranian proxies in the Middle East. Let's now connect with CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. It's going to be a full day there, Nancy. What do we expect, though, out of the meeting between Netanyahu and President Trump?
Good morning, Errol. Well, there's a lot to discuss because while the first phase of this ceasefire deal has been moving along basically as planned, 18 Israeli hostages released so far, Hamas slated to release a total of 23 during this initial 6-week phase one. Phase two is a lot trickier. It involves trying to get all of the remaining hostages back to Israel. It involves a longer-term ceasefire. In fact, Hamas is saying right now they are not going to release any more Israeli hostages in phase two unless there is a permanent end to the shelling and aggression by Israel. At the same time, Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure within Israel from his right flank to continue to attack Hamas in Gaza after all the hostages are returned. And there is also a lot of pressure to go after Iran and some of its proxies in the region. And so that will be a big discussion for today, along with whether the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which had been on track to happen before this war broke out a year and a half ago, whether that can get back on track. So all that is on the table for this meeting between Netanyahu and President Trump today, the first major world leader that President Trump is hosting here at the White House since taking office for his second term.
Now, let's talk a little bit about tariffs. You had the Trump threat over the weekend to implement them on Canada and Mexico.
Right.
You had the markets react on Monday, but Trump also spoke with leaders of both countries, and now those tariffs are paused. But meantime, China has already implemented retaliatory tariffs. So any discussion yet that there may be discussions between Trump and President Xi or Chinese leaders in the coming days?
White House officials told us yesterday, Errol, that President Trump is going to be speaking with President Xi sometime today by phone, we assume. And so we'll have to wait and see whether that conversation has the same effect as the conversations yesterday with the leaders of Canada and Mexico did, where suddenly these new tariffs from both the U.S. side and then in retaliation the Canada and Mexico side get halted, at least temporarily. These 10% tariffs that were imposed by the U.S. on China have been met with some pretty steep retaliatory tariffs by China itself that are set to go into effect next week. They include a 15% tariff on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, as well as a 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, large engine cars, all of these imported from the U.S. They're slated to go into effect, these Chinese tariffs, next Monday. So the stage is set for talks between the U.S. and China on how to head these new tariffs off.
And Nancy, as you've laid out, China, Canada, Mexico, these are nations whose economies are intertwined with business here in the U.S. And I know the White House is now characterizing the talks and the pause on tariffs for Canada and Mexico as a win. But what is the U.S., what is the president getting out of this?
So I can lay out first what he got out of it, and then we can discuss how significant that really is. So Mexico has agreed to send in 10,000 soldiers. These are Mexican National Guard members who would go to the U.S.-Mexico border on the Mexico side to basically help block shipments of fentanyl from coming into the U.S. and block migrants trying to enter the U.S. illegally as well. And then on the Canada side, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has agreed to deploy more choppers, drones, and personnel to the Canadian side of the U.S.-Canada border. The White House, as you pointed out, Errol, has declared this a big win and a sign that the threat of tariffs worked. However, it is important to note that a lot of these things that Canada and Mexico have agreed to do, they have either done in the past or they had already promised to do before this threat of tariffs even came into the picture. So the question is it worth it? Is it worth the instability, the threat of prices rising here in the U.S. and, for consumers in Canada and Mexico, our neighbors, our allies, our trading partners? Is it worth the financial markets taking a tumble early yesterday all around the world because there were concerns about a trade war? The White House says yes. The White House says they're going to try to do the same thing with European countries. There are a lot of economists who say no, the wins just aren't worth the price tag.
All right, we appreciate all of that context for us, Nancy. Thank you very much.